ただいま
We would now like to start the Innovative City Forum, Innovation for Happiness, Art and Science session titled In Search of a New Sense of Values in Happiness. To begin with, I would like to invite four people to the stage as a kick-off a discussion. Mr. Joichi, Director of the MIT Media Lab, Mr. Fumio Nanjo, Director of Mori Art Museum, President and CEO of Sony Computer Science Laboratories, Mr. Hiroaki Kitano, the Representative Director of Loftwork, Ms. Chiaki Hayashi. Please welcome the guest to the podium with a big round of applause. So, Ms. Hayashi, the floor is yours. I understood that this session was going to be very popular, and thank you very much for so many people for attending. This, I think, is the sixth time that we held this, but over the last 5 years, how had the technology changed our life? Art and technology is now spoken in the same sentence these days, but 5 years ago, the three of us, or Mr. Takerako was saying that art and the technology needed to be discussed at the same time. So we had discussion about change based on technology previously. How will biotechnology extend our lives? The microbiome. We are living with 100 trillion cells, and so can we achieve health without the organism? We talked about blockchain, and how should the society accept this is what we have discussed previously. But this year, our focus is not placed on technology, but our focus is now placed on people, individuals, the society. How will technology provide affluence for us? How will it give a sense of meaningfulness in our lives? And that's where I would like to have discussion upon today. And as part of the keynote presentation, and as shown by the video of Kathy before, say, for example, the mobile phones that we are using right now are very convenient. And Kubota-san was saying this, but the electricity, it links to the cloud server, it leads to the global warming. And so we talked about the overall situation. We talked about the more finite situation. But I gave the three gentlemen a homework. And so I'd like to start discussion in order to respond to the homework. And what I've asked the three people to do is, what's the best scenario that the technology, the changes will bring about, and also the worst scenario that they could also bring about. And so I would like for you to touch upon that and talk about the innovation for happiness, talking about the visions and so forth. And so could I ask Mr. Kitano to start with? Could you bring up my slide? And this photo is from Greenland, and as you can see, you saw in the previous video, and I went there about 10 years ago, just in the Arctic region. It's about 200 kilometers into the Arctic region, and I stayed here for about a week. And I was on this type of boat, or tugboat, and traveled by about an hour, and there was a village of about 70 people. And it was only about 6 months ago the electricity finally arrived, and it's a village that does not have a toilet that we'll be willing to utilize, but there was a Wi-Fi there. Why? Well, the first thing that they've done is to establish Wi-Fi connection after electricity arrived in the village, and I was quite surprised, and I've asked, and there were kids there, and in order for the kids to look at the world from this village of 70 people, you need the internet. And so we needed the Wi-Fi. And to do education, it needs to be done through an online environment. That was the reason why Wi-Fi was introduced. And here, the global warming impact is very strong, and the icebergs is very unstable. And But the ocean in front of the village doesn't freeze over during the winter time, so the fishermen can fish all throughout the year. So the global warming will cause troubles for a lot of people, but there are a few people who may actually end up gaining benefit out of that, end up with happiness. But what is important is that you need to go, otherwise you don't understand. We can only imagine what brings happiness. Sometimes we are dependent on that imagination. And now, there is a possibility for the technology opening up the future for children. That, in one sense, is a happy thing. And this is a slum just outside the Manila near the airport. And this was taken several years ago. And this was also a photo taken in the same year. And this is a small island in the Philippines. This is a fisherman's island. And almost entire the fishing, the catch sent to Japan. And here, everyone is still smiling, but the slum that I showed you before, there is no the future. And in terms of the standard of life, it may be low based on our understanding, but it does look pretty happy. But they living on a self-reliant basis, or as part of the financial economy, there could be a difference. What type of income level do you need in order for one to be happy? And you become dependent on other factors. And this is in Cambodia, an unelectrified area. And if you can sense electricity for 3 hours during the nighttime, then that will enable people to do some work during the nighttime, children studying at the nighttime. So that could make significant change, and that is what technology can bring about. But can you sell solar panels or batteries? They don't have much income. They only make about $1 a day. And so if you sell the electricity to them, we will take away their income completely. And the industry that they have there is textile. And what can we do there? And we are not creating the solar panel technology for this. We are making the 20%, 25% the efficiency, the product using the best materials in the world, best technology in the world. But even if you have something with 5% efficiency here, which is more inexpensive, that could have make a lot of difference. So what and to whom do you want to provide could change the perspective quite significantly. This is Lao, and allows these monks in the morning. It looks quite bright, but this is still quite dark. It's before the morning breaking. And here, in this country, there isn't a schooling system that is well established. So when they actually become a monk, they can receive education. That's the kind of social system that exists in the country. And nearby, and that system has been well established locally. And this is in the upper area of the Mekong River, and near the national border with Myanmar. And this is the water they use for their living. If we have the reverse osmosis, using a little bit of electricity, we can create very clean water. And we can create happiness to fulfill the basic needs by doing this. But when you start to do this, so I start to think about what is happiness. And I went here. This is Bhutan. Bhutan say that the national happiness is the happiest nation in the world. So I visited the country, and this is the country. And this is Gante in the middle of the Bhutan. And this area was not electrified when I visited. And the reason why it wasn't electrified is that crane and the birds, and they said they don't electrify because if they electrify, the cranes won't come in. But the people said that who is more important, the people or the cranes, and they were angry. But anyway, so this is the kind of houses that they live in, and this is what it looks like in the inside. And so I visited, and I was invited to tea, but right next door, this person's younger brother, I think a junior or high school student, and they were doing this type of religious thing. And I was asking why, and apparently his brother died at a very young age. And this is a Tibetan Buddhism. And what it is that in one's previous life, you ended up dying 5 years less than the life you were supposed to live, and so you were reborn again to live that 5 years. Then after dying, you were going to relive the next life, and so people were kind of convinced with it. That's the kind of culture they live with. I thought it was really interesting. And here, killing anything is forbidden. They don't even kill insects. They don't have insecticides. And I saw a cow, and I thought that this cow will not be killed because they don't allow the killing of any living things. They will use the milk for cheese and so forth, but they don't kill the cow for meat. And just looking at the scenery with the cows and the cattle, I felt very happy because they will not be killed. But they do produce meat as well, which is more towards the India. They don't kill the beef themselves, but as long as someone else kills it, you can eat it. And near the cliff, when the animals fall off the cliff and die, then you can eat it. So you can't kill it, and you can't have someone else kill it for you as well. But if there is a dead animal, you can eat it. So there's kind of an interesting interpretation there. But I did see happiness there. Here too, this is called Otatas Mountain in the Morocco near the Sahara Desert. And right next door there was a Sony television. So there was a mix with the traditional culture and the modern civilization. And it was unique, but looked very happy too. But at what level and in what way are they happy? And I thought that was quite relative. And in our society, the culture is created based on obsession, like technologies are created on obsession. This is a photo from CNN. This is Atlanta headquarters. Ted Turner, he came up with an obsession to do a 24-hour-day news, and they had the CNN. Now it's a 24-hour-day live broadcasting now, but it wasn't the case in the past. And this is changing the world in quite a significant way. This is Solar Impulse, and this is an aircraft that travels around the world just based on the solar power, and they've succeeded, and they've went around the world many times now. But we are actually enjoying the benefit of this in the developed nations. But we also have a part of the world which is not completely irrelevant, but they do have some sense of highness. But at the same time, if we go to Bhutan, can we be happy? Probably no. So I think this is all very relative, and monetary values or something that is material is not sufficient. They probably measure happiness based on completely different yardstick. And these makes way into the creating harmony locally, which is a good scenario. This is the opposite. I'm not saying life science is a bad thing, but what's happening is that the chromosomes can be established through IPS, and they've achieved success with mouse. And life can be extended as a consequence eventually, but it is quite costly. And previously, even whether you had money or you didn't have money, most people lived for about the same number of years. Well, there is a difference between Tokyo and Africa, but if you live in a similar area, then one's life expectancy is usually about the same whether you have money or not. But then if this no longer holds true, we may enter into a world where how much money you have will have implications on the length of your life. Then that is likely to create a much greater sense of disparity. And if that spreads too much and if it becomes desperate, then it's a serious matter. Climate change is a serious matter, but we may end up with this type of complex issue as well. This could cause the social the concerns or anxiety. This could be close to a worst case scenario.
最初にまずは
Thank you. And based on the culture, things are different. It could be something relative, and probably no one believes this, but what is driving the world right now is the economics, and it's saying that it's not only based on that that happiness is defined. So I think you have a comment. Yeah, please go ahead, Mr. Ito.
出るかな。あれ、
伊藤さん、please。
あれ、これスタートからやると回るはずなんですけど。
ちなみに北野さん、when you went to Bhutan, while you were there, did your happiness go up? Looking at the cattle, yes.
So did that disappear when you returned? Well, Bhutan, the information is limited. It's a very unique. So those people who lived in Bhutan in that kind of environment, they could be happy. But if I went to Bhutan, I don't think I could be happy. Thank you. Joichi-san, please.
北野さんの
Now, Kitano-san, toward the end, you mentioned the complexity issue. The world is indeed complex. And with evolution, it's very complex. And the Earth, we mentioned 1.5 degrees, and there have been volatility, variation, but temperature used to be stable. And the complex system is very interesting because that with evolution, the feedback loop are created, and the emissions will be input, and it's a self-adaptation occurred. So without control, there was stability. That's the same with the body temperatures. It is stable. But Kitano-san, you would know, even if we disrupt the physical composition, it is very robust that will continue to regulate, and that is the same for evolution over time. A very complex system has been created, but if we look at the economy as well as society, that's also very complex. But self-adaptation does occur to a certain extent, but stock market crashes, and our bodies compared to our bodies is still unstable in terms of happiness. According to a theory of evolution, we configure the world, and living organisms as well as humans as well as corporates exist. And for the companies to succeed, strategy formulation will be very important. This is like game theory in terms of evolution. Simulation can be made. What would humans do? What would companies do? Can be simulated. And I think being successful is equal to happiness. And in terms of companies, in order to be happy within the current system, it has to beat the competition. Resources will have to be increased. Stock price will have to be made higher, and produce products for the consumers. So the ecology of companies will exist in the market, and I also make investment in equity, and if the equity price goes up, it makes us very happy. So if there is a basic needs missing, like toilets as well as longevity and food, in the post-war period of Japan as well as in Europe, we want to increase the products to gain convenience, and that lifted happiness to a certain extent. But if we look at the people in Bhutan, their lives are not so complex. They will work very hard, and with the product increase, it would make it happy, 70,000 or 90,000. To that level, with the increase in number of products, it makes people happy. But beyond that threshold, even with increase in products, it will not make people incrementally happy. So if you look at the economic system in the time, I think this is economic paradigm that was created when there was shortage of goods. And based on human strategy, wanting more goods, wanting more products to make us happy, I think that was the happiness in Industrial Revolution. And the role of technology thereof is to make the system efficient, produce products, making convenience, but it makes us fat. We will take on too much calories, and in fact, longevity is declining in you. Yes, there is also environmental destruction taking place. Social issues are coming to the before as well. When the internet started about 3 decades ago, similar to the Greenland issue, I thought that if everyone were connected, it would make the world very happy. I was a believer in this concept. So as long as we have technology, it will lead to happiness. That was me 30 years ago. But the internet has become like an exorcist girl. This is what happened to the internet. So what are we going to do? And be set with this state of the internet. So I've changed from 30 years ago when I was very optimistic. This is how I see the internet now, so it doesn't make me very happy. With technology, the internet and disruption in the world is occurring, and there is also environmental destruction as well. Economy as well as technology advancement is causing this, but technology, entrepreneurship, and investment to fix the problem may make sense to a certain extent as ideas, but we cannot approach it with the same mindset of causing this problem. It is a complex system. And for the first time, the three issues, public health, environment, and social problems, they are complex problems. This effort will not suffice to, or higher efficiency is not going to fix this. This is the first complex issue besetting mankind. How are we going to resolve this? Now, this is very much related to Kathy's presentation. If we look at the Marshall Islands, it's very large. 25% are dominated by indigenous people. Biodiversity is very important, and 80% of biodiversity exists in the 25%. And so 25% of forest carbon, and 95% of all languages are held by indigenous people. So what is their happiness? It's similar to what is happiness in Bhutan. It's not just having products and goods, but rather coexistence with nature is very important. This is related to Timothy's presentation as well. When you talk to indigenous people, they don't think that land or animals are something that they own, but they feel that they belong to nature. Nature owns these people. So it's the dichotomy of object and subject. We tend to be the subject viewing the world. That is reflected in civilization today. But from the indigenous people, everything is considered the same, whether it be people or animals or stones. And then you have a new type of aesthetics. This is also very much reflected in Shintoism as well. The indigenous thinking as well as the Jomon era, if we go back there, this thinking exists. This connectivity is very important, according to my view. And this will also generate culture as well as art. So I was rather pessimistic, but I'm also an optimist. Gen Z is what I'd like to talk about. In 2001, so these are the Generation Z. They're going to be 18 years old. And 34% of the world will belong to Generation Z. And these people, this generation, is very diverse, and it's very difficult to generalize. They are tech savvy, and they're cool-headed because they are aware of environment issues from when they were born. They have been using the internet from the time they are born. So I think they're more cool-headed. The university students in my school are belonging to this generation. There was in Florida, there was the mass shooting that occurred, and these are the activists against this. On the internet, utilizing these tools, is also causing disruption in society. But using the same tools Jerison Z is now trying to promote the arms ban, and 3,800 schools have had walkouts. And the gun control is now moving ahead because of this driving force. Although adults were not able to deal with this. Me Too, Time's Up is also a movement taking place in the United States promoting the women's rights. This is also becoming prevalent using the internet, which was used in a disruptive manner in the past. And the gender inequality is what they are trying to resolve in the United States. They are not Gen Z. They have placed more importance in society rather than money. They're very culture conscious as well. Triple bottom line is receiving much attention. To have 1.5% to be achieved, but economists whether they, if there is an emergence of same sense of values in India and China, and wanting to have a big house like the United States, that seems to be the premise. But young people today think that's disgusting. In our generation, we make us very happy if we went to a private jet. And we want things, but I think the next generation will have a different mindset. So the values of the next generation should be emphasized. They will buy products, they can be active, and they can make cultural changes as well. So it is related to technology, but economic policy and technological issues will not be useful in dealing with the problems presenting us. So we have to change culture and the values. And in order to change the values, the criteria will be very important. Is it money or social impact? That criteria is very important. And I'm impressed by people because young generation today can deal with the difficult problems with the appropriate level of understanding.
Before we go to Nanjo-san, I wanted to ask this. Relatively young people, whenever they are always challenging and they want to change the society based on different sense of values. I think the young people in the past also had that. But then inertia, the principle, the economic sense, but not to be wound into that. But Generation Z, the people who are 18 right now, they can create this significant paradigm shift. What's the reason for that?
Because they're driving this. In the past, they didn't have tools. It was democracy and without strength, and even if they tried to fight, they were put down. And in university, activism was very important in Japan as well, but it was no longer cool. Unless there is effectiveness, it doesn't it isn't driven. Arab Spring is the same. When they are suppressed, it's not very popular anymore, but Parkland children are very effective because they're trying to teach other people as well. Without going to the government, they can exert pressure. David Hawke, there is a boy in Parkland. He wasn't accepted by any university, and he tweeted. And Fox TV, anchorwoman said, she made fun of him. He is 18-year-old, didn't get into university, and he was ridiculed. And then she was criticized, and so there was a boycott for her program, and sponsors left, and she was fired. So one high school student can topple this conservative famous announcer. He won over her for the right reasons too. he has technology, the movement is effective. That is the reason why they are empowered.
So not trying to work with the previous generation, but use them tools.
Yes, you have to take action. That's very important for environmental issues as well as for food. The young people, the high school students today are taking action. More recently, there was Instant Noodle Association is where I went to speak. There are scandals that are occurring, for example, for contamination. Then, what is the effective measure? To open up the plant to high school students, and they will check for contamination, and then they will convince their parents, and then it changes. It's no good approaching the parents first, because the children today are evidence-based, and they are able to convince people who are older for environmental issues. To the high school students, we talk about space as well as environmental technologies as well as safecast is here. We're trying to teach English, and they will become interested in science. That means that they will be able to mobilize their parents.
Maybe ICF should invite more high school students next year. And last, I presented Nanjo-san and the leadership, the innovation for happiness. Please peek on that topic.
Thank you very much. Actually, I took on the homework very seriously. So I looked at the worst case scenario as well as the best case scenario. The worst case is very simple. Well, AI could be taking over, but it's not love, is it? Well, that's right. It's AI. So for love or I in Japanese language to take over is wonderful. That is not the case. Same for biotechnology. Joy was famous, voiced his concerns on this topic. Now, most of this is illustration. It's not directly related in terms of, but it's all artwork. This is Australian Patricia Piccinini. It's a sculpture. And it doesn't have very fine hairs as well. So this is the age that we are approaching. Then ultimately humans may disappear. That's the worst case, obviously. I don't know if that's the worst, but it's not worse for the environment. I don't know if this is the worst case, but it could be even worse when humans could become slaves. Maybe we are already slaves. Some people assert that. So we are poised for disaster. That's the worst case. So now let's look at the best case. AI takes over manual jobs. Some people say that people will be made redundant, but the technology has been developed in order to make work easy. And maybe humans will no longer have to work. Then we can relax and enjoy our time. This was from 60 years ago, an idea, in the 1960s rather. It's a metabolism concept by a Japanese architect. This will become the future city, and since it will continue to metabolize, so the city will be a living organism. That is how it was conceptualized. At that time, there was only mechanical technology, concrete, glass, and steel created this future city. And this was a poster for the Mori Museum. But when technology develops further, what is going to happen? It is likely that cities will disappear. And within the very low parts of the green, it will be almost an invisible city. But it is supported by high-level technology. People might be looking as if they have a very relaxing life, but that is it's supported by technology. This is Anis Kapoor's sculpture in New Zealand. And you can see that there is one car at the opening of the trumpet. So this is how human beings can enjoy themselves in the future. And we're assuming that people will live longer, and there will be no health issues, there will be no aging. At that time, will people be happy? Will humans be happy? That is what we're trying to discuss today. So we have to think about what will make people happier. I would like to ask George. So if we have a scientific analysis of happiness, can we design it? Because happiness, according to my view, is gradual improvement. I think that will lead to daily sense of happiness for humans. So in terms that is true for studying and work, salaries could increase gradually, and what we can't do yesterday, maybe we can do that today. And the continuum of this will lead to happiness. So how can this be pursued? If we can design it scientifically, it would be wonderful. Then for a certain person, there could be a certain study that he would be engaged in, and then work will be decided. A crisis may occur, mistakes may be made, but these issues can be overcome. That is how people's lives will develop, and then that means that people will feel happy all the time. I was wondering if this is indeed possible. I would like to discuss this later, but I think it's only recently, but this is like expansion. So unless we expand, we cannot be happy. What about Aborigines in Australia? We are not in the discussion phase yet. But in the case of
See, for Japanese people, the elderly Japanese people, they feel happy when they can do today what they could do yesterday too. Please allow me to continue to speak.
So that is my question that I would like to pose to everyone. So killing time is very important, and that is what I'd like to emphasize. This is Onoyoko, and she's playing chess. It's all white. And then sports and culture are the best ways to kill time. I think that is the world we are going to reach. Kitano Mori Museum exhibition is shown here. So I am trying to represent the culture by art. It is the most state of the art. Now, it is for the spirit. It is for the mind. When we consider innovation, but it is different to art. Art is different to industry and technology. This is the Pantheon architecture in Rome. There is a hole in the ceiling, so when it rains, water will come in. But I believe this hole is very important because we have the framework of architecture, and there is architecture technology that is supporting this architecture. It's a Renaissance style, and it is open to the sky, and I think this is the quintessential art, because art is after all imagination, and it's a private environment. It is aesthetic as well as inspiration, and the sense of the world, the worldview is also very important, and it is all embedded in art. It is not a theoretical. There is instant when it expands, and I think this is what is necessary for the lives of humans.
これで終わりです。
大丈夫ですか？
はい。
はい。
So, thank you. I think the audience is looking at the speakers, thinking they're wonderful, but we should start the discussion. And in the interview with Dalai Lama, and there is a book called Art of Happiness, a great book. And I wanted to link to this happiness theme here, and you can call many things happy. When things extend, when you receive things that you wanted to receive. But for him, he used the word happiness and pleasure. So he separates happiness versus the pleasure. Based on Dalai Lama, when there is a family is going well, if your family becomes twice as large, your happiness doesn't become twice as large. And when there is a complex balance achieved, then he sees happiness that he sees particularly from the Buddhist way. And everything is improving a little bit by a little bit every day. The materials are increasing little by little every day. Or when you have a drug to stimulate one's brain, Dalai Lama calls this pleasure. And using drugs or technology, you know which part of brain you need to act on to create that type of pleasure. But in order to evolve the brain, have a way of making people feel happiness based on dopamine by stimulating which part of the brain. And our brain has been formed with a trick for us to make work when we wake up in the morning. So the happiness that we define here need to be defined more clearly, otherwise many things get mixed up together.
So what I'd like to pose as a question first is the following. When we talk about happiness, do you think it can be measured going forward? And if that is possible, what factors will be included? The reason why I ask this question is because when we talk about GDP, it doesn't represent the objective or the goal for us, but many things are evaluated based on the GDP. But even with more money, does it really make us happy? It might be a good thing, but perhaps it is not in line with the direction for society. But we don't see the alternative emerging yet. So I think that is a discussion that must be had today. And we are talking about happiness. Ishikawa Yoshiki is saying that it is well-being, because it should not be a personal emotion, but it should be for society. It has to be a good situation for society, well-being. If we can measure this, human will be driven to act. And by having a sense of achievement, it is necessary for it to be measured. This is also a question that has been posed. So my question to the three panelists is as follows. As we try to achieve well-being in society, if there is going to be more relative happiness, how can that be measured? Do you think we can have such a measurement, and what would be included in the measurement? So let's talk about the definition of happiness. So that's the discussion we'd like to have now. Now, whether individuals are happy or not, well, it depends on the individuals, how they feel. But in terms of society as well as the economy level, it could not be, may not be the GDP. But if we look at the quality of life today, in order to maintain this, economic growth will be necessary. It's essential. Sustainability, solar panels, renewable energies, if we want to introduce it, it's still very expensive. There has to be economic strength. Otherwise, we will not be able to resolve the environmental problems. We can't go back to the Stone Age. We can reduce our lives, but then the longevity will be reduced by 10 years or so. So we want to maintain the current state. That means that there has to be backed up by economic growth. It doesn't have to be double digit, but it needs to continue to grow. When we talk about the countries that are level of US, Japan, or Singapore, that's fine. But the countries that are represented need more goods. They need clean toilets. That would make them happy. So it's a simple needs being met will make them happy. So that means that there has to be economic growth at a significant speed. So we have to purchase their products. There has to be economic significant growth. Otherwise, it would not make them happy. So I don't think we should do away with GDP yet. GDP has to grow at a certain speed. We are fine, but they will remain where they are today.
But what I want to point out there is that, say, for example, in Africa, so we send money to them, but rather than the money we send, there are a lot of money that is actually extracted behind the scenes. That's more in terms of value. And where people have technology and power, that's where the money will concentrate. So if you try to invest or entrepreneurship, money won't go to the poor countries. So when you say GDP and what Mr. Kitano-san was saying is a little bit different. When you talk about increase in GDP, the tools for increasing GDP is not something linked to those countries. Rather than that, the science and technology, culture, maybe non-monetary resources that could potentially increase their standard to be raised. But if it goes back to GDP, but if you say we can't continue the way we have gone so far, but it does have some kind of attraction power, whether it be music or art, or the economists can explain. And when you explain using economics, then it becomes economists the explanation. And what's not good about GDP is that, of course, you can talk about living standards or material things, then you can say well-being and flourishing, but you need to raise the basic element. But in order to raise that, the methods or how to do the measurement there, we probably need to change there a bit. Otherwise, as a consequence, you will not go and head into that kind of direction. And doing this as a sport or aid, it may spoil them. So they need to be self-reliant to do that. So maybe provided technology, but so we talked about the Marshall Islands before, and if we left them alone, they could be happy, but we haven't left them alone. It has become a kind of chaos. The Bhutan as well, they say their happiness level is high themselves, and if you try to help and you try to intervene and you kind of disrupting the situation, and there are the Aboriginals or the native people in the Amazon that haven't been contacted, and they said, please don't contact us, but the Christianity, they go and try to help, and they introduce sickness and they end up killing these people, and they were very happy without money and materials, but these kids look at the smartphones or that everyone else has that leads to the village culture from being destroyed, and whether they're happy living the way they are, who is to do the judgment? It's very complex there. Are we going to use our measure and they're not unhappy, so we need to help them? But they've been living there for thousands of years. They can continue to live for thousands of years the way they are. But if you go and intervene, they will only last for a generation. And so 6 generations from now, what will happen? If we take a perspective like that, then maybe just the environment of what you have improves. We need to make comparison.
So that is a very difficult area to deal with. Are we going to just abandon without intervention because they're happy today? We are making that decision too. And for the people living there, like Inuit and others, can they remain? I don't think they want to stay there. I think they want to use the internet. So whether we should intervene or not is an issue. Maybe if they don't know, they wouldn't want it. But once they know, they want something. They want these goods that are available. So it depends on the village, I believe. For example, Kayapo Indians in the Amazons, they have seen our lives. They are going to international conferences, but they don't want roads, and they don't want to have pavement, and they're maintaining their proud culture, even though they know what the other half is living like. But anyway, maybe they want the internet. But if people don't want the internet or testing atomic bombs in the Marshall Islands, they truly don't want to have that. But I think we've made them victims with our support. Nanjo-san, I think that's a discussion on culture. So it depends on how we set goals. Objectives will be relevant. Now, we are talking about ultimately it is culture rather than economy. But the culture is something that is greater. And that is, in this context, values will be decided. Religion, as well as lives, as well as practice and tribal culture, everything is included in this. So within this context, our objectives and goals will be decided. We are living in this society. We are becoming closer to the Europe as well as the United States. Modern age, we have absorbed so much and developed technologies, and our values could be different to people in the Amazon, and they know that. And it's very important whether they know our lives. So they might decide they don't want the society, and that is the culture. But there is also Inuit people may want to emulate. So we cannot judge which is right, which is correct. But they have to be able to make the self-determination. This is very much related to SDGs as well as diversities. In that case, when you talk about culture, how is that generated? What is the source of that culture? It could be religion, tradition, practice, customs, and religion, sense of the world. Everything is amalgamated to create a sense of value for that society. And these will differ from society to society. Bhutan is a good case in point. It's a Tibetan Buddhism, and there is a trust toward the government in terms of and with the trust in the royal family, everything is provided for free, such as education as well as healthcare. It made people very happy, but with the emergence of this internet, but only TV is made available. So India and British BBC is seeing this, and CNN. And therefore, everything bad about Bhutan will be considered to be outside of Bhutan. But with the smartphones, now they have information of other areas, and there is also clubs, and now suicides are going up because information is made available, and they want to see this. That's why I have high expectations for Gen Z. They know this. They know everything, and they have the technology, and they don't want to be like that. And the parents they criticize is causing the problems. Populism by Trump is anti-elites and anti-rich people. That is the basic views. Just because there are some people who want more things because they don't have things today, but there is a cultural shift that is occurring. That's in the United States and in Japan. When I lectured at universities, I asked them what are they lacking, and they say that they have everything they want. So it's very close. So when we achieve this level, that is probably the view that is coming to the fore. But if you go to Africa or Bhutan, I think they still want more things. And if they have enough things, even though they know what's available, that would be what their responsibility is, what I'd be very interested to know. If they still think they don't need, or is it going to be sufficiency because they have reached that level? It depends on the culture as well. For thousands of years, they've been living there. They have lived the lives of their parents and continue with the culture. If they have strong culture, they don't want anything that is not in line with their culture. Polynesia is a good case in point. And also, their Polynesia is different. It's very rough. It's very easy, and Amazon.
But in pursuit of money, material things, or your desires, and the Buddhism said that you need to have the power to throw things away. I talked about Shintoism before, but in Buddhism, they said that you should throw things away. And just pursuing that things, but it's saying that the individual need to have the strength to throw things away. In Buddhism, there isn't many the religious theorems and things like that. They're talking about how one should live only. But I think that's what they're trying to say. And it's kind of the reverse of what was being discussed. And let's talk about the time before. In the past, during the Jomon period or the American Native Indians, they have more time than what we have right now. The amount of hours that they need to work in a day is very limited. And if you investigate, they have time for playing, they have time to spend with family, a lot of that. But because we want things, we created the Industrial Revolution, and we are working like slaves. We don't have time to spend with the family. We may have a lot of material things, but we don't have enough cultural time to spend. They may not have the toilets. And they may not be able to eat or at any time. They may not be able to eat whenever they want. Their life expectancy may be a little bit shorter. But which is happy in comparison to our situation is difficult to say. Having listened to the conversation, there is a globally common index as an infrastructure, and there is also an element that changed based on the culture. So I think there are two aspects. So it's not just one or the other, but something common in the world, a yardstick, rather than it being used as the basis for the world, but the various regions or various groups, what do they place value upon? And what are they going to set goals on? And I think that is what is being asked of more now. That's what I thought. Now, Joy has referred to the Generation Z. We are about 18 now. That could be a hope for us going forward. Now, interesting story here. When I speak with the creative leaders of various countries, then our generation, there was a value in things that are different, like different culture. But the people of Generation Z, what they target for is very close. So the world, rather than seeking for the difference, they are heading for the same thing. And there are more young people striving to that, and they say they want to support that. We are seeing increased number of people like that. I don't know the age of people here. Italians are good, French is good, the Japanese is good. If that's our generation, then when I speak with high school students right now, they're talking about insect food or aquaponics. So it's kind of the way of looking at food in a different way, whether it be Amsterdam or other areas, there is that commonality. And I don't know whether it's Generation Z, but there is new power vis-a-vis ourselves. And over 40 people, if there is a new power to be generated in the future, in order for us to coexist with that, is there anything that we can do? We must not live until 200. And Kitano-san said that can be possible. I want to live long. I want to live 500 years. But that, I think, is a common, a new, the recognition. You don't need to own things, the sustainability things, the diversity and respect for various culture. I think this is becoming somewhat of a commonality now. That is true. But what is interesting is that by reaching that level, the young people who are successful in China, they've reached that very quickly, that thing. And that element, you know, the resource that they spent to reach that is quite limited. And when that start to appear, then I think things could start to change. But not wanting more is because they already have things, so they are able to make access to that. I talked about the Bhutan, the Buddha. And he was a king, so he basically had everything he wanted before he became a monk. And so he kind of became desperate and became a monk. So you need to understand the background. So there is a sequence of things occurring. But having said that, when you want more, and so if we continue to travel on the path that we have traveled on, that the world will collapse. So we need a different way of things, but we need to do this well. Otherwise, then the north-south issue in the environment. So are you saying we're not to have it? You've destroyed the environment to have what you have now. Now the environment is in trouble, so you're making us not to have this. That is wrong. So that kind of the debate is taking place. If we continue to have that discussion, things will not go well, so we must not do that. But completely different approach. Sustainable, and in many sense, something that will realize happiness, whether it be technology or social innovation, I don't know. But we need to bring something like that. We need to think about that.
話戻しちゃって悪いん
I'm sorry for going back. I think we're deviating. We are looking for something that is common. Commonality should be pursued, and I think that's very important. We've been talking about culture extensively, and people talk about identity all the time. There is no word for identity in Japanese language. But there are technical translations, but it doesn't work in Japanese language. So Japanese people probably thought that we are not different to each other, but now identity is emphasized. So to differentiate ourselves with others and was necessary, but we were very bad in finding common characteristics. And when we identify what is common, and if we can share, I think our perspectives can change. It says that brick and people are not different. I understand what was mentioned in the keynote presentation, but I couldn't understand the analogy with the bricks. Because it's different, something that is different, but there is no meaning in the difference, then that means that it is not different. So that was mentioned in the keynote presentation, and I'm still trying to digest this. Humanism is talked about. It seems that the humans are at the very top. This is very much relevant to the Renaissance religion, Christianity. God is at the very top. But what about slaves? Slaves are not people. And in recent society, the black people did not have rights. And even now, there is discrimination. So it seems that everyone is looking at things with one's perspective. You're talking about the South, but you're looking down on them. It's condescending attitude from advanced nations that is prevalent. Now, between the brick and people, even with animals have ethics. From stone to humans, it's a continuum that is connected. So even when we talk about people, how can we define people? With artificial intelligence, will make a human or someone with autism? Are they human? It's very difficult to draw the line with animals, humans, and objects. And making a decision could cause issues. In the Boston area, the African American families have the asset they have is $8, and it's $247,000 for a white family. It's $8 against $247,500. So that's the disparity in terms of financial assets according to the ethnicity. So it's not a fair competition. People living in the Marshall Islands, they were subject to atomic bomb tests, and when the sea level rises, we are trying to encourage them. It's not fair. And same for discrimination in the United States. You can't just tell us that we are the same now. There's so much disruption in China. And now we can't say that we are at a level playing field. That's not fair. There is the fairness in terms of opportunity, and also to have fairness take into consideration past history. This is a concept that we have to be cognizant about. We're not aware of this in Japan, but it's very important in the United States. Depending on the identity, there is friction, and some white people feel responsibility for this, and there are also people who are very angry, and they are the majority, and before they come to the fore, they have to be beaten. So I think this is going to occur globally as well. It's akin to war in terms of competition amongst the cultures. This is very true in terms of martial islands environmental issue. Why they haven't done anything wrong, and their island will go under the sea. They are very angry, and it's connected to all the indigenous people in the world. If you go to a meeting of indigenous people, they don't want to make up. They don't want to work together. That is not the prevailing view amongst them.
In that sense, we are seeing the weather becoming more unsettled, unstable. So you can't talk about in goodwill. There is only one Earth, and what we have done so far has led to unexperienced the typhoons or tsunamis. So everything's the same. If it is only for Marshall Island, I'm sorry, can we actually make payment for that? But isn't that same one and the same? And when we confront crisis, then you kind of start to look at the Earth as one. And I think that's part of the message to come out of the SDGs. But it's SDGs that is moving the government, but it's not really moving people at this point in time. And I wanted to raise one more point, and we'll have the breakout session after this, and we will discuss more specifically with regards to what we should strive for with regards to love, environment, or whatever. But as part of this kickoff session, what I wanted to ask you to end with was that something that we can speak about immediately. We'll have this communication power. I don't know whether it's a vision, but it's kind of a storytelling. The U.S. Starts with being poor, and you don't lose, but they continue to say, yes, I made money. And that has being reflected into a sense of value there. But in the case of Japan, you done something a little bit of so you were paid back for that, and it was taken to a paradise, but you kind of became older in the end based on Japanese traditional story, or someone else will do things. In the case of US, I've done it, but in the case of Japan, if you've done something good will happen to you a little, but things will not change all that much. So rather than yourself changing things, it's someone who is a superior who is going to do the work. And so the story tends to be kind of continuous without making very significant change. So I think there is a bit of that storytelling element. So the three the panelists, what type of story would you like to see unfold going forward? Like Astro Boy being a friend of the people. We'd like to see this type of scenario increase. That it can be any topic. It could be the urban theory. I don't know. It can be the fintech, the credibility, but we talked about this kind of social theory. But to conclude with, I'd like for you to speak from your personal view. And Joy, you have a daughter that was born very recently, so you can talk about happiness vis-a-vis your daughter. But any story that you can share with us, what do you think? In the case of Japan, so animism, so coexistence with nature, and there is spirituality as a spirituality anywhere around you. That's kind of a thing here. People are not above other animals. Others, everyone is equal, and I think that is so true. And but. People have destroyed the environment to this extent, but I think the population will all of a sudden shrink to about a third of what it is today. So I think there is going to be a natural stabilizer that will function. And if we actually achieve a soft landing on that, then it's good. But if we don't, then we may end up with the dramatic catastrophe, whether it be the climate change or the significant infectious disease, where the population will decrease the third of the current level, and they will, based on this memory of nearing extinction, they will start something new, and that could create a new civilization that could become the real story. I don't know whether this will occur within our lifetime. Irrespective of what we do, the system that functions on the Earth, it will make the adjustment. If we look at the historical, the population level, it goes ups and down. It's like tulip bubble. And so everyone probably expected to come down. And I think this intuition is right. And I think the population will decline based on catastrophe in the future.
点をやっている
そう
ぴったりですよね。
ぴったりですよ。
それを予知してからの展覧会だと思うんです。
プロモーションしてたの俺今。さっきちょっとイメージも見せたけども、相当まあプロボカティブなんていうのかな、刺激的な作品もあります。でただ僕なんかはそうなった時に自分にできることはないという思いもあるわけですよ。そうすると今できることっていうのは自分がコントロールできることは何かと考えていくと、やっぱり80年とか90年とか生きてる時間をどのぐらい豊かにテイストするか、味わうかっていうことなんじゃないかと、もし幸せってことを考えると、でそれは人によって全部違うんでしょうけれども、まあ、何かのために全てを効率的に捧げるのではなくて、自分がどういうふうにテイストするか、まあ、実際にアートなんかそれにつながってるんですけど、文化一般全てそうです、いかにこの時間を使っていくかと、そしてそれに自分が関係していくかっていう、その辺のところをもう一度考えてみてもいいのかなというふうに思いますね。そうすると目標の設定がみんな変わってくると思うんです。金を稼ぐことではなくて、金を稼ぐことは手段であるということに気がつくと思うんです。
なるほど。他人のために、
目的ではないと。
だから他人のために、社会のためにっていう前に、自分で自分のことをやればっていうアーティスト視点的でもありますね。
いや、
つまり、
金を稼ぐために、いや違う、なんつっていや金は必要なんですよ。それはアーティストも分かってると思う。だけどもそれは金のためではないってこと。その上に乗っかって何をするかが重要であって、その目標設定っていうのが問われる時代なんじゃないか。
なるほど。でもその議論はさっきの事前打ち合わせの中では、そんなこと言ってお金に取り込まれてるじゃないかアーティストってジョイは言ってましたけど、ジョイの物語はどんな物語かね締めたいと思います。いかがですか。
まずさっきのアメリカで、アメリカンドリームって、これって嘘なんだよね。貧乏な人は金持ちにほとんどなれないの。だから誰でも宝くじに当たれるみたいな腐ったストーリーで、頑張れば成功するっていうストーリーがアメリカの人種差別が続く理由なの。みんなそれを信じてるわけ。そうするとみんな黒人が貧乏で白人が金持ちだから、きっと黒人なんかダメなんだろうね、どっかがっていうことになっちゃうわけ。だから自分で人種差別を作っちゃうわけ。みんな誰でも金持ちになれると思っちゃう。だからこれはね、すごくね、悪質なストーリーでなくすべきなんだよね。で、僕はアニメ。
It should be done away with. It should be done away with. We have to do away with that. Now, I'm trying to show Totoro to my daughter. She enjoys it very much. And Totoro has a Shinto motif as well. Relationship between the child and parent is also emphasized. That's very important. Dalai Lama came to MIT recently, and we hosted him. And the daughter of a professor, and she asked, what did you learn from the priest? And he said that everyone lied to me, and people in the village raised me, and they did not lie. But he was on the mother's shoulder, and when there was a game of pulling the right ear going right and pulling left ear is going left, that was a game, and that was the only truth. That is the unconditional love of my mother. That's what he said. So I was very impressed. So it's a connectivity with nature, and Buddhism is very interesting because I'm working with a priest today, and the feeling to deviate from the truth, and with theoretical deviation from the truth is same. It's culturally error, and a scientific error is also wrong as well. So what is important is to become close to nature. Respect for nature and unconditional love of the parent are emphasized in Buddhism in terms of relationship. That's been emphasized. So Totoro is very important. Totoro as well as Noshika could be very relevant in this regard. It is true. The value of Totoro, if we ask them to explain in 3 pages of PowerPoint, even with thought, what can be conveyed by Totoro movie cannot be reflected in a PowerPoint presentation, according to my view. SDG is a PowerPoint. So Cassie showed the image, the video, and the actually seeing that the video is very important. Values of this kind is likely to become more important going forward. We are going to have a breakout session now, and we will discuss the way out of time when everything is different. But there could be indicators that we can identify as well. This is perhaps an important message that humans should be working upon, even though we recognize there are differences. The cultural representatives will become the representatives, and science and engineering people should be thinking about how it can be reflected in a PowerPoint. New indicators should be brought about. So I believe it where we can ask people to engage in the breakout sessions. Is there anything else that you would like to mention before we close? Now, for the detailed discussion should follow in the breakout sessions, and I'm looking forward to hearing from everyone at the wrap-up session about the wonderful ideas that are likely to be generated. Thank you. Please give the panelists a big round of applause. Thank you very much. Let's give them a big round of applause. Thank you.